So I said animals have legs for very good reasons. However, we have neglected most of these reasons and started to put all animals very close and very densely together. And then, under the effort of a lot of energy, we take food, harvest it, bring it to the animal, and what drops out of the animal, the dung und Dünger, we take and we bring with a lot of energy back to the fields. This is a system that originated under the perception of abundant energy supplies. We are not abundantly supplied with energy, apart from this nuclear reactor that will at least shine for the next billion years. That's cool. But our fossil fuels are going to an end, and if we don't find a good way to deal with our energy demand, we will not solve our energy crisis. There will not be always another solution. It was, we moved from whale fat to oil and now to gas, and we are drilling deeper and deeper, and probably we will harvest meteorites and find something else or switch back to nuclear power. But we can also use the regenerative power of the sun and the nature of an animal to move and harvest and fertilize directly on the spot by mimicking the behavior of an animal in its ecosystem. And as Joe Salatin, one of the American colleagues, would say, we also allow the animal to express its natural behavior. Give the pig the chance to express the pigginess of the pig, the chickenness of the chicken, the cowiness of the cow. It's very, very easy to look at animals in agriculture as production systems, but they are not. They are co-beings, and they deserve a good life. And if we as farmers are taking care of land, animals can play a very essential role in regenerating the land, because there are no ecosystems without animals on this planet. And even though very often I have highly environmentally interested people in these groups, and how many vegans or vegetarians do we have in this group today? Okay, surprisingly low amount, I have to say. Normally we have 50 or 60% at least, for a good reason. Because confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, are one of the biggest crimes of humankind, personal opinion. It's not just an environmental disaster, it's also a highly ethically concerning way of producing food. If we live in synergy with animals, there's a good case for meat and for animal protein, because they have a trick. They can eat this, and even though this is not very nutritious, they can make protein out of that. Ruminants can, we can't. For that they have 4 stomachs. Monogastric animals struggle with high fibrous fodder plants. Cows can do that. And that's amazing, because this stuff, grasses, they grow all over the place, also on very, very poor soils, where we can't crop, but we can graze it. And there's a very good reason for the anthropocenic way of traveling with animals in a nomadic way and living from their proteins. You find that some of the most fertile soils in the world are old grassland soils. Why is that? We look at the cows and understand it. Why do ruminants produce fertile soils in nature? It's a symbiosis that evolved over many millennia. Grass plants are pretty amazing. Many of them are perennial. We don't see it because, it's lawn. We do see the amazingness of a perennial forest, but we don't see the amazingness of grasslands. Why is that? In the forest we see hundreds of years of biomass accumulation. In grasslands we don't see that, because it's walking. Nature has found a very, very nice trick to combine this perennial plant with a ruminant. Grasses do grow from the bottom. They push themselves out, and their little solar panels are actually food for the ruminant. What happens when the ruminant has bitten off the solar panel? The plant has no chance to harvest sunlight and collect energy for regrowth. So there needs to be a trick to regrow after being bitten off. And that trick is energy storage in the form of roots. So now the plant takes energy from the roots, sheds a little bit of the roots, no? Because the root is kind of dying when the energy is pulled out, and it regrows. And this little organic matter of the off-dying root turns into humus. So the soil gets more fertile. At the same time, on top, the animal has eaten, and it has eaten in a manner in nature that would classify as herdy. Because we have predators roaming around, the herd is close together and protects itself in strength in numbers. And what happens? They have trampled and they have mulched the ground. They have also defecated and urinated all over the place. So they have also nutritiously enriched the soil. They fertilized it. So the plant has a nicely mulched, nicely fertilized condition to regrow. And now this little shoot comes, and in nature the animals would move. Because they have shit and urinated all over the place. Don't want to eat in your toilet. Move to fresh grasses. They can't do that if we lock them up and do a set stock grazing scheme. The animal comes back to this very yummy and fresh growth, bites it off again, and the plant had no chance to collect enough solar energy and restock the root stock. We basically just abstract. Set stock grazing. Very common practice. It's labor intensive to move your animals and simulate a herd effect, but it's worth it. Because now the plant has time to regrow, time to harvest solar energy and restock the energy storage. And when we come again with the animal, the plant is strong enough to root deeper and deeper, and even with the pulling effect of the cow, like it sends a shock through the root and it stimulates growth. We don't do that easily with a cutter. There is an amazing symbiosis between the ecosystem of a grassland and its animal inhabitants. We aim here for a recovery time between 60 to 90 days until we come back to the pasture, depending always on the season, and very often the devil is in the detail. It's not easy, it's an adaptive management. And we can't supply a silver bullet. We need to take rain into account. We need to take certain exclusion phases into account. When we have bird nestings on the ground where we want to protect the bird life, we can't graze that area there. We have to see that our herd is close to infrastructure when we want to handle them. When we want to bleed the cows for medical purposes, we need to pull samples of their blood to see if they are not contained with the borreliosis herpes virus. And sometimes we need to castrate our young calves. So handling facilities and handling times need to be taken into account. It's a very complex thing. And it gets even more complex when you add elements of a more diverse grazing community. So why not include sheep? Or add chicken to the mix? Because what do we see in nature? With the big herds of ruminants, it's not only buffaloes. There are zebra and gazelles, and then there are the little white birds on the back of the buffalo. No? They pick the ticks, they catch the flies from the air, so they regulate the pests. And in an agroecological production approach, we try to mimic these. And we would follow the cow herd with a chicken caravan, where a group of layers would live and can scratch the paddies, pick the maggots, and sanitize the pasture basically. In Germany that's very difficult, at least with our veterinarian. He didn't like our approach to the stable so much. So right now we can't have the chicken on pasture, which is very annoying. It's also for us in northern Germany quite contextually difficult because we're close to the river Elbe, And there's a thing called bird flu that hits us very regularly since the last 3 or 4 years. So an ultra-mobile concept that's based on a light-weighted stable that is designed around all-day outdoor access doesn't go well with German regulations. The communication about that fills, I think by now, 2 folders, and it's tiring as fuck. But we're not giving up yet. There are solutions with mobile stables. The problem is always then finding the right balance between ecology and economy. Because moving the chicken as often as we want to takes time, energy, and is in a fine balance with the economics of it. So we need to have a certain amount of chicken in the stable to make it worthwhile. And the bigger the amount of chicken, the bigger the stable needs to be, the more heavy it is, the more labor intensive it gets to move it. So we had a very nice idea to take a model from Australia that is very lightweight and works quite fine in their regulation setup, and put the 300 birds in there and go on pasture. Ultra mobile pastured poultry, you could say. I like to differentiate the classical approach to mobility, because the optimal time of moving, I think, what do they say, 3 months. But if you look at the behavior of chicken and the impact they do to the land, 3 months is still better than not, but it's still a lot of time, and it's a lot of shit that accumulates and a lot of impact. And we aim to move the chicken every 2 days, apart from weekends, then it's 3 days. Also connects with the regrowth of the grass, because depending on humidity and temperature, the regrowth kicks in different times. And we would like to avoid eating this very fresh little solar panel and give the time for the plant to recover. So don't stay too long, move on. Challenging. We could run a small stable where we can fit in 90 birds in or so, but it's very difficult, because then I would need to sell an egg for €20 or so, and that's not working. But we are in the midst of an EIP project eventually, and then maybe we try this out, because there is a nice thinking behind a combined stable system with fixed stable and mobile pasture unit. But when we have to go inside because of bird flu or the weather is shitty, we can basically dock on to the mothership and have the stable in good conditions.
How many chickens do you have?
At the moment we have 290.
Don't they have predators here? Natural like if you had to have them on the field?
Power supply with solar panels and an electric fence does the job quite well. Okay. Unless you forget to check the battery or the sun is not shining, then you also lose a bird or 2 or 3. It is, we do have aerial predators, but there are differences in the genetics. We can talk a little bit about like heritage genetics. The cows you see there are Galloways and German black-spotted lowland cattle, Deutsche Schwarzbuntes Niederungsrind. Both of them old heritage breeds. And the DSN is more prone towards a milking genetic. And we have seen over the last 2 years that they do struggle with the poor pastures we have. There's very little clover yet. We just spotted actually the first spontaneous clover patches in the pasture, so there is a sign that management is improving, or the pasture is improving through management. But it takes time. It's not a fast and easy thing. It's easier to plow and drill what you would like to grow, and then when it starts to change to something unfavorable, just change it again. Reset, reset, reset. Keep it fresh. But that's not a very sustainable approach in our opinion. So we would like to move species diversity through management. We do add seeds. So after the chicken have been disturbing around their scent baths and stuff, we do throw seeds. And also when Martin is digging, because he's annoyed by the flies, our bull, we have a hole. It's annoying for some. We see it as an ecological diversity potential and throw in seeds. 2 more reasons why to move animals. It's not only managing the fodder, it's also moving away from pathogens. Yeah? The places where the animal stays the most are the places where the throat or the grass is disturbed the most. At the same time, we have the most nutrients there because they shit where they sleep and they shit where they eat and drink, and they trample all the grass, but there's no active plant to take up all these nutrients. So by moving a lot, we avoid these over-frequented places, and we avoid this over-fertilization on spots where there is no plant to take up the nutrients. What we're missing here are our tree lanes that we were not allowed to plant because they would disturb the view. Because that's one of the biggest challenges. On very hot days, we need to open pathways to the shadow. And then we go back into the problem of resting areas over frequented. But if we would now have every 50 or 30 meters a tree lane, they could always find shelter from wind, from rain, from sun. We also need a lot of water spots. So we have a water line running and supplying over 90 different parcels, and a mobile little drinker that we can easily connect and switch off. We also need to use a fence system that allows moving so frequently with high work efficiency. Because in the end, we are unfortunately not funded for a benefits educational side, unless maybe somebody wants to give a donation to our association. But it needs to be efficient.